Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Dr. Darren Hood. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome those of you who are listening for the first time. We are having a ball with this series where we've been talking about the harsh realities of UX maturity, and we hope and trust that we're expanding viewpoints because UX maturity is very, very important. It is something that a lot of people have heard about, but they hear about it from a one-dimensional perspective. So we're hoping that the way that we are sharing this topic is something that's helping people to take more things into consideration and to accept the responsibility of managing it. As we have said over and over again, UX maturity has to be managed. If you do not manage it, it will manage you, and you will not like how that will turn out. People have been saying that, they've been saying that UX maturity is not important, that we shouldn't focus on it anymore. One person actually said, and this may sound a bit unbelievable, but the person said, we shouldn't talk about UX maturity anymore. Nobody wants to hear that they're not mature. The fact that somebody can't face the fact that they need to develop in a given area, the mere fact that somebody is acknowledging that should be a telltale sign that something else is extremely, extremely wrong. Neurotic perspectives, people who cannot deal with the fact they fall short in an area. We all need to grow somewhere, even in things that you're good at. You can always be better at it. And just because you need to improve does not mean that people are looking down on you. It doesn't mean that you have not accomplished anything of note. But people want to feel like they're accomplished, even when they're not. They want to feel like they've done great things, even when they have not. To have that mindset is to live in a state of delusion. It's not good. We shouldn't want to be there today. UX maturity is important. And as I talked about in one of the very first episodes in this series, I talked about how you could really look at regular earthly standard human maturity and see some alignment between that and UX maturity. And just like we have to advance and we have to mature in the natural, so also do we need to do it when it comes to UX. One cannot just do UX work and not tend to issues associated with the maturity in this discipline. So we've been talking about it from a very broad perspective, because again, people normally learn about UX from a very narrow perspective. And in other words, they usually hear about it, to be more specific, I should say, people usually hear about UX maturity as it pertains to the organization, how easy it is to do the work, how much support you're getting. It's all organizationally focused. But I learned over the years, UX maturity is about a whole lot more than that. And that's what we're trying to present today. In this episode, we're going to talk about something we have not spent a lot of time, definitely not dedicated time over the course of the series. We've been talking about here and there educational UX maturity or academic UX maturity. Yes, there is an aspect of UX maturity that revolves around education. How are courses delivered? What are people learning? Are the learning experiences providing an experience that's going to help the people develop? Because education is meant to produce qualified individuals. Well, when it comes to UX education, are qualified people being produced? Are they learning the right things? Are they learning it the right way? Are they being challenged to engage in critical thinking? Are they really... One of the factors that is produced in education is self-efficacy. Can people evaluate themselves properly? Do they know when they're doing a good job? Do they know when they need to improve? Do they know when they've done a bad job? Do they know when they hit and miss? All of those types of things are associated with a proper learning experience. And so as I'm going to declare today, there are a lot of issues that let you know that we've got many, many problems in education today. And so the topic for today, as I formalize now, the topic for today's episode is UX maturity in the age of faux education. Faux education, or in other words, fake education. We're dealing with fake education today. A lot of the learning experiences that are being deployed are anything but. And so we're going to prove that out to you over the course of the elements that we're going to cover. We're going to start off by talking about a story. I want to share a story with you. And someone on Reddit, you can probably search for it and find it. Someone asked a question, and they asked, is the Google UX certification course any good? Is it something that we could place value on? I paraphrase a little bit. Is it something that we should embrace? Is it something that has any value? And this is something I talk about a lot. I have talked about over the years, and I chose to chime in, and I just made a few comments and left it at that. A lot of people are not going to like what I said, which I will share in a moment. A lot of people are not going to like what I said, but please know and understand, the fact that somebody doesn't like what is said does not change it into a lie. Matter of fact, a lot of times people don't like what is said because it is true and because it sort of strips down what and who they are and who they present themselves to be to other people. But that doesn't mean that it's not true. Here's the answer that I gave. I said, it has always been a terrible course. And the Google UX course is partially responsible for the state of the discipline today. It is not designed properly. It does not follow the scientific elements associated with proper learning experiences. It relies on peer review in many cases, or actually throughout the entire course. It relies on peer review, which means that people who know just as much or less than you, in many instances, are reviewing your work and giving commentary, but they don't know what they're looking at, no more than you knew what you were doing. Lots of people cheat their way through the program. They turn in blank assignments and they beg for credit. They will literally tell you, hey, I just want to get the certificate. Can you please give me a passing grade on this? I know people who have seen that and shared that information with us. It is a joke. And Google doesn't care. And Google has never done anything about these problems, even though the things that I'm saying and calling out and bringing to everyone's attention are common knowledge. This is a phenomenal example of what we're facing in education today. But I'm going to give you more points to consider than that. But let's go back to the basic beginning. I want to share that story as we get started. First and foremost, what is education? Really, a lot of people don't even think about that. They don't know. They don't give any thought to it whatsoever. If somebody says they're going to teach you something or somebody offers a program, a lot of people with no critical thinking whatsoever, the thing that education helps you to do better, they just dive in and they plunk down the money that someone is asking of them, and they never consider whether or not, even from a presentation perspective, whether or not that learning experience is being presented ethically. A lot of times it is not. It is not. Of course, I got to cast a little bit of shade on the bootcamp world. You can go to the Wayback Machine and look at the way that courses were being promoted at the boot camps back in 2011. And especially when you're looking back, knowing what you know now, go and look at what they did. The lack of integrity, the lack of ethics, the way that they marketed those courses is quite apparent. However, only if you have a proper level of UX maturity, you can tell, especially if it's sound from an educational perspective. And a lot of people, when it comes to UX educational maturity, they lack. So a lot of people will not recognize that the way that they advertise, the hype that was presented, they don't recognize that as being flawed. I'm here to tell you it is. This guy, the guy with 6 instructional design certifications, the guy who was doing instructional design before he was doing UX work formally, the guy who has a PhD. Yeah, that's what my PhD is in. It's in educational leadership. I know education. I know how it's supposed to be structured. I know how it works. And what people did in the boot camps is 1 billion% wrong. Some people will say, it gave me a good start. Oh, you mean the same start you could have gotten if you had just gone and bought some books and read them on your own? That's right. What the boot camps offered was no different than somebody going and buying some books and reading it. Matter of fact, you would have been better off had you read the books and just done exercises based on what you saw in the books instead of having somebody giving you a map to go somewhere and where you were trying to go and the map they gave you don't match. I'm here to tell you that's what happened. So big problem. So just keep that in mind. But back to the foundational elements. What is education? It is a formal process that is used to help people learn more about a particular subject. Now, that's a very basic definition of what education is. But take it a step further. Predominantly, education helps prepare and qualify someone to operate as a professional. As said earlier, education is supposed to produce viable professionals, people who know their stuff, people who can go into an organization and bring value. Education has been churning out qualified people for years. That is what education is for. Education is a science, folks. It always has been, it always will be. But a lot of people who take on the appearance of providing education don't know anything about the science, don't respect the science, and do not operate from a scientific perspective. So when that is missing, you are basically talking about faux education because it's falling short of what education is supposed to do. So it's not genuine. It's like faux leather. It looks nice, especially from a distance. Don't rub it. Don't let that faux leather jacket come in contact with the wrong thing, or you're going to get a nice big fat rip. You're going to get a nice abrasion that will never go away. So faux education does not offer in any way, form, or fashion the same value proposition that genuine education does. And we need to understand that today. So again, real education is a science. It provides information about a specific discipline. It exposes students to related history. You know how many people learn about UX and do not know the history at all? The numbers of those individuals, it's off the charts today. Education equips someone to think critically, as we said earlier. It helps develop collaborative expertise. It helps people to become more comfortable with working with other people. That's why you have those group assignments in education. That's what that experience is supposed to provide someone. And then lastly, for this point, education builds a commitment to and a respect for rigor. Interesting. When you have people who have not been educated properly or have not been educated at all, and they take on a UX role, they are very rigor averse. They don't want to do work. They just want to be in UX. They just want a UX role. They just want to get a check from UX. They don't want to match the value prop that the discipline says we're supposed to be bringing and offering. It's really interesting, but this is rampant today because of faux education in many cases. Proper educational structure, folks, it contains three major facets. And if you've ever seen any of the talks that I've delivered about education, you've heard me say this before. Presentation, application, and feedback. Presentation is when someone is learning information. They're hearing some of the basic information, a lecture, if you will, a video. Somebody is talking about a concept. They're talking about a method, a methodology, a deliverable. They're providing information to the learner. That is the presentation. Number two, application. After you hear a presentation, you're supposed to have an opportunity to practice what was presented to you. Now, after the presentation, after you get an opportunity to practice, then you encounter the third aspect of a proper educational experience, and that is feedback. Now you need to hear from someone who is qualified, not just from someone like Google does in that program where you have a peer. That's like kids learning from kids and none of them are experts. And people will say that that's the best way to learn. No, it's not. Scientifically speaking, it isn't. It is not. You might learn something if you know the content, and you teach it. And again, you're honoring and operating in the science, but not if you're just out there winging it. Spaghetti has no place in learning. It has no place in practicing UX. It has no place in teaching. It has no place in learning. When you get feedback, you have to get feedback from someone who is a subject matter expert. You have to get feedback from someone who knows what they're doing. You have to get feedback from somebody who was able to observe what you did during application, who knows what was presented and knows how well your application matched what was presented, and then give you feedback, actually tell you how well you did or where you need to improve. Those three things are what a learning experience is comprised of, a proper learning experience. Now, when up-and-coming UX professionals are educated properly, UX maturity is going to benefit. The users are going to benefit. The practitioner benefits. The team benefits. The business benefits. Everybody benefits when proper education is in place and people have a proper learning experience. But when a faux learning experience or faux education is presented, all bets are off. And there's going to be lots of problems that come out of that, especially if people thought that what they learned was accurate. Folks, to this day, think about it. Some of you may not be aware of what I'm about to mention, but an extremely small percentage of higher learning institutions over the years offer UX courses or programs. Today, very few. 1990, very few, almost practically none. 1995, very few. 2000, very few. A few more, but still very few. 2010, the numbers improved. They increased quite a bit, but still less than 300 programs throughout the entire United States. I don't know what the numbers were abroad. However, I know that the numbers are still going to be dramatically less than what they are in the United States. And if I remember correctly, it's less than 2% of institutions of higher learning in the United States offered courses or programs with UX-related content or focus. That is really interesting when you think about it. And the numbers are still lower today. Not only are the numbers still low today, the numbers are actually less to a degree because a lot of institutions shut their programs down. They shut them down. People were not going to the institutions of higher learning to learn about UX because of the cost. It was cost prohibitive. I understand that. Yeah, I went to school. I got UX-related master's degrees, but I know that it's cost prohibitive. And I know people, sometimes without talking to me and finding out what I truly have to say about it, they really will sort of come against what I'm talking about when I talk about education because they feel like I'm not empathizing with them. I know. I understand all of that. I'm a professor too, but I understand all of that. I know everybody can't go to school, but that still doesn't change the facts. Education still has to be properly structured to constitute a proper learning experience. You cannot get around that. Yes, by the way, I'm in the process of developing a self-taught way to approach learning about UX, but by no means is it meant to negate higher learning. We can't touch what's offered in higher learning. It simply is impossible to do. Do you need a degree to get a job in UX? No, you don't. I don't care what a company says. Some companies require degrees. They will not even talk to you if you don't have a degree. But can somebody without a degree do the work? Yes. Matter of fact, I got my first full-time UX job in 2005 after I was doing it for years in the evenings when I ran my own little mini agency, if you will. But when I got my first full-time UX gig, I didn't have my bachelor's degree. I had an associate's degree. Nobody cared about that associate's degree, and it certainly wasn't in UX, but I was in the process of getting my bachelor's degree when I got my first full-time UX job. And that was just something that helped me to get past a certain screening point, if you will. But I could have done the work without it, and I already was doing the work without it. And of course, by that time, when I got my next full-time UX gig, I already had X amount of experience. I already had the one degree, but I didn't have a master's degree. I have 2 UX related master's degrees. I got my first one in 2011, and that's just because I chose to do that. That's not because it's required. I chose to do that. Just a little commentary on that so people understand. I'm not saying that you have to have that today. Just because a company says you have to have a master's degree, I've seen that. You have to have a master's degree to get a UX job at some companies. It's just a reality. That's what they choose to do. And just in case you're wondering why they require that, it's because people know that there's a certain degree of rigor associated with formal education. And by formal education, I'm talking about institutions of higher learning. I'm not talking about boot camps. I'm not talking about the MOOCs, your Udemy's and your edX's and companies like that. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about institutions of higher learning. The rigor between the two is completely different. And people don't realize that. The Google program, there is absolutely no rigor in that program. And folks need to understand that. There's very little rigor in boot camps. Hey, that's just a reality of it, folks. It's just a reality. And ironically, of all the people I've ever met that went to a boot camp, I've only met a handful of people who have any respect for rigor whatsoever. And it's because they had that in tow in their own persona when they went into the boot camp. They didn't develop that in the boot camp. They already had it. Matter of fact, the only truly successful people that I've met that went through boot camps already had a certain personal makeup before they went to the boot camp. Boot camps don't produce high quality professionals in and of themselves. The people who went to boot camps that do great work, and there are some people that do that. I know some of them as well. However, they brought that to the table when they came to the boot camp. So we need to understand that boot camps have never offered much of anything. And considering what they charge people, they were all a ripoff because they overcharge everybody. Boot camps overcharge everybody, and they never gave back or rendered the same value that was in alignment with the thousands and tens of thousands in some cases that they charge some people. But just some more boot camp commentary. We can't cover this topic without talking about that. So again, very few programs in the United States, I think in the world, you do not find a lot of UX educational programs. It's really, really sad that that's the case, but that has always been the case. So throughout the years, folks, UX's ascent, I should say, education has been problematic. I mean, just think about what I just described. Proper UX education has been poorly represented, both in volume, again, the number of programs and courses offered, but also in concept, the way that they've been delivered. And that's really interesting today. A lot of institutions of higher learning do not offer courses or programs in UX, but of those that do, they don't offer the presentation, application, and feedback that's required to have a proper learning experience. Sad, isn't it? Many offer courses that are taught by people who have little or absolutely no experience in UX, so they cannot give you the kind of feedback that you really need. That's happening a lot. Matter of fact, you have a lot of instances where people who don't know anything about UX take over programs, and then you have this huge cronyism element that's at work where they want to hire their buddies. I have seen programs jettison qualified people in favor of their friends, and their friends don't know anything about UX. And now the people who are enrolling in the programs are caught in the middle. They're being victimized by somebody else's desire to promote their friends. They have no care. They have no respect for UX. They have no commitment to UX. And now the students suffer. It is so sad. It's a shame how much this is happening today, but folks, it is a reality. No interest in the discipline's well-being at all. You have many with low UX maturity who feel or felt that they were competing with boot camps. And so you have a lot of UX programs and courses, mostly programs in this case, where they felt that they were competing with boot camps. So they changed their programs, their master's programs, their bachelor's programs, their grad certificate programs. They changed them to compete with the boot camp. You're not competing with the boot camps. Universities are accredited. Boot camps are not accredited. Boot camps are not accountable to anyone. They just throw a course together and they roll it out. And then people buy into it because it's cheaper than a degree program. You ever bought anything that costs less and you bought it because it cost less because you didn't feel like you could afford or you just did not want to pay for that other product or service because of the cost associated with it? And then later you get the rude awakening that you find out that that thing that you paid less for really didn't do anything for you. I often tell a story about back in the days when I was a help desk person. For those of you who don't know, a help desk person is the person at the company who, when you have a problem with your computer or a problem with a software application or something of that sort, you reach out to the help desk people to get your problem resolved. So I'm at the company running around, fixing computers, taking care of different situations. And I thought that it would be a great idea for me, since I'm going to spend a lot of time on the floor. I figured that I would just go and just buy maybe some jeans or something that doesn't cost that much. I figured I would just go and buy some cheap khakis. I wouldn't spend the money on the Docker. Docker is going to cost me at the time $35. I'll just go ahead and get some cheap khakis and go ahead and do that. And it doesn't make sense for me to be on the floor in some $80 wool slacks or something like that. We'll just get some khakis and we'll call it a day. I went to one of the little stores that would sell you a nice pair of khakis, or at least we thought it was a nice pair of khakis, for $16 or so. And I bought 4 or 5 pairs, so I made sure that I could rotate them and I would be in a good position. Well, I paid less for the khakis, but they didn't last. Those khakis cost half of what I had to pay for a good pair of Dockers. But those 3, 4, 5 pair of khakis, I went through them so fast that I ended up going and buying the Dockers anyway. And I had those Dockers for years. They never wore out. So the $35 pair of slacks was actually the better way to go, even though they cost more. When you factor in how long they last, factor in how many times you're able to wear them, what was the better way to go? And UX education is really the same way. Why spend money on something that's not going to be respected? Why spend money on something where they're not really teaching you? It's faux education, folks. It's fake. When you engage in faux education, it's like you're in a movie, you're in a production, you are performative. You are an actor and you go through those programs so you can be familiar with the terminology, a script. You know what to do, how to put on a front in a given situation so that you can fool other people who don't know any better. Really, really, really sad that those types of things are happening, but that's the cost associated with faux education, because the faux education is not respecting UX maturity, because if they did, they would want to churn out people, produce people who actually know what they're doing, who are actually going to bring value, which in turn makes the program look good. And then now it justifies more people going through the program. People are going through the boot camps because people were going through the boot camps and getting jobs, but they weren't keeping their jobs a lot of times. And they certainly weren't bringing the value. So at any rate, really important stuff for folks to know when it comes to education. But again, the institutions of higher learning were never competing with the boot camps. But when you had people who had low UX maturity running the programs, of course they're going to think in many cases that they're competing with boot camps, because when somebody has low UX maturity, they can't tell when somebody else has low UX maturity. So they were ascribing more value to the boot camps to the point that they restructured their programs to basically turn it into a boot camp. Then now a boot camp oriented operation, but with higher learning cost, man, that's a worse proposition, but that's what happened. Many of these people also, low UX maturity leaders, these people are addicted to hype. They're addicted to trends. They are addicted to Kool-Aid. And they doom the people who opt into the programs to subscribe to that same Kool-Aid. Folks, when these things happen and are in place, people with a passion to learn are going to suffer. They're not going to get what was promised to them, what was proposed to them. Inaccurate concepts are going to be taught. People who are subject to operating in anchoring bias, those who tend to believe the first thing they hear that it's accurate, they're going to be doomed to assume that what they're being taught is correct. And who knows? I know people who were taught an incorrect way to engage in UX, and for 5, 10 years, they operated like that. Some of them woke up and they were able to snap out of it and go back and repair things. They were able to triage their career and their own concept of what UX is, their own perception, but a lot of people don't. I've seen people who they claim that they've been doing UX work for 15 years. They still don't know what's going on. I saw a person who said that they've been doing UX for 10 years recently. Actually, no. That person, based on their own story, they have been doing UX for about 17 years. And they said that UX was not a thing prior to 2007. That means that that person doesn't know the history. That means that that person is going to spout misinformation. When somebody spouts misinformation, everybody hears them is in trouble. Folks, just crazy stuff. So anchoring bias is dangerous. People don't and won't really learn UX when these situations are at work, when they're being subject to it, but only a semblance. And when you only learn a semblance of UX, folks, that's not really UX. Have you ever been satisfied with a person who only had a semblance of cooking, where you really want to eat those meals? Do you want to get your teeth cleaned by somebody who has only a semblance of dental hygiene? Do you want to get an operation from someone who only has a semblance of skill of operating in the medical profession? No. So you don't want to have a semblance of UX. When these things happen, folks, anarchy ensues and UX maturity suffers. In other words, poor and low UX maturity begets poor and low UX maturity. And faux education does not have a solid value proposition, folks. Folks, those of you who have been subjected to faux education, you can still recover from that. You can go and start to dive into the right books. Because, there are a lot of books out there that present faux education today as well. I talk about them sometime. If you've never seen it, go and check out my book recommendation list. I've got several of them on uxuncensored.medium.com. Go and check it out. Go and look at those books that I recommended. You're not going to dive into those books and then be subjected to things that are not in your best interest from an educational perspective. Those things in those books that I present are going to help you to learn about UX the right way and bring the right value, and you will not have any regrets. You will not have to double back and triage yourself. But unfortunately, these are the types of things we have to do. We have to navigate some very muddy waters in the educational world and only to achieve the goals that are matching what we're really setting out to do in our hearts today. So this is the story of UX maturity in the age of faux education. The things I'm talking about are not going to make anybody feel good, but you're going to feel worse if you don't pay attention to what it is I'm trying to warn you about today. And if you listen to those folks who claim that I am whining, no, I'm telling you about a problem that if you don't navigate, you're going to run smack dab into it and you're going to have a problem on your hands. So we're trying to help folks out. We hope you respect this. We hope you understand it. We hope you value it. Folks, don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. This information, these are things that people need in order to thrive in the discipline today. All right. That's it for today, folks. So this is Dr. Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until next week, folks, happy UXing, everybody.